Most men waste hours trying to figure out how to stay on her mind. They overthink every message, replay conversations, and wonder what they should say next. But the truth is simple. Just 3 words, when said the right way, can make her think about you again and again without you doing anything extra. And no, I'm not talking about the obvious line like, I love you. I'm talking about words that slide quietly under her skin and activate the part of her brain that keeps replaying you like a favorite song she didn't even realize she put on repeat. Here's the real secret most people miss. Women don't obsess over looks or perfection. They obsess over how someone makes them feel. Beauty fades, perfection gets boring, but feeling stays. And if your words make her feel something no one else does, you don't just become interesting, you become unforgettable. That's why these 3 simple words matter so much. I'll share them with you soon. But before that, you need to understand why most men get this completely wrong. Most men believe attraction comes from doing more texting, more explaining, more chasing, more effort to prove they care. They think if they just show enough interest, she'll finally feel it too. But obsession doesn't grow from effort, it grows from impact. The right words don't just reach her ears for a moment. They echo in her mind long after the conversation ends. They show up when she's alone. They return when she's quiet. They resurface when she least expects it. And before I give you these exact 3 words, stay with me until the end because I'll also explain how to use them in a way that feels natural, not forced, not obvious, and not rehearsed. When used correctly, she never sees it coming, but she always remembers you. Imagine a woman thinking about you all day without you sending constant messages, without you chasing her attention, and without you trying to become some perfect version of yourself. Just 3 simple words. That's it. 3 words that, when used the right way, can be the difference between being just another man she forgets by tomorrow or the one who stays in her thoughts long after you've gone quiet. Let's clear something up right now. This is not a cheap trick, it's not a movie line, and it's definitely not a silly gimmick meant to control or manipulate her. This is real. It's grounded in deep psychology and in how attraction actually works beneath the surface. I'm talking about the part of the mind Carl Jung studied his entire life, the unconscious mind, that hidden place where real desire lives. Most people think attraction is logical. They believe it works like a checklist. He's handsome, he's smart, he's kind, he has a good job. Okay, I'm interested, but that's not how it truly works. If it were that simple, dating apps would have solved love a long time ago. The truth is, the connections that move us the most aren't logical at all. They're emotional, they're symbolic. They live in the part of the mind you can't see, but you can feel. Jung explained this perfectly when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will guide your life, and you will call it fate." Think about that for a moment. The memories that stay with you, the moments that linger, when someone's smile feels different, when a simple comment touches something deep inside you, when a glance feels like an entire conversation. None of that is planned. Those are emotional triggers. They slip past logic and hit your core. They wake something inside you that you didn't even know was asleep. This is where many men go wrong. They try to create that feeling by doing more messages, more checking in, more effort just to be noticed. But the harder you try, the less magnetic you become. Because true attraction doesn't come from effort, it comes from resonance, from the calm but lasting impression you leave behind. You create that when your words and energy bypass her conscious filter and go straight into her unconscious mind. This is exactly why those 3 words matter. They work because they're not just words, they're symbols. They plant an image in her mind. They invite her into a quiet story she can't help but imagine herself inside. And once that image takes root in the part of her mind that holds emotion and meaning, you're no longer competing for her attention like everyone else. You've entered a different space entirely. You become the man she thinks about, even when she doesn't fully understand why. So, here's my promise to you. By the end of this, you won't just know what to say. You'll understand why it works on a deeper level. This has nothing to do with tricks and everything to do with psychology. This isn't about making her obsessed for a few days and then fading away. This is about creating a connection that pulls her emotionally and lasts because it touches something symbolic inside her. It's not magic. It's not manipulation. It's simply how the human brain works. Once you understand this, you stop chasing. You stop stressing and you stop trying to be perfect. You realize you don't need flawless lines or constant communication. You only need to know how to speak in a way her unconscious mind remembers, and that understanding starts here. Here's a truth most people never talk about. Attraction doesn't begin in the logical part of the brain. It doesn't start with lists or checkboxes. It doesn't care about being nice, kind, successful, or good-looking in the way people think. Those things matter later, but they don't create the spark. The connections that stay with us, that quietly haunt us in the best way, are emotional first and logical later. This is what Carl Jung spent his life studying. He showed that the human mind is driven just as much, if not more, by symbols, patterns, and unconscious pulls as it is by reason. We like to believe we're making smart, conscious choices, but in reality, the unconscious arrives first. That's why Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will guide your life, and you'll call it fate. In simple terms, until you understand what's pulling the strings underneath, you'll think things just happen randomly. You'll say you just clicked with someone. But that click isn't random. It's emotional and symbolic. Something in their words, their tone, their presence speaks directly to your unconscious, skipping logic completely. And this is where most men unintentionally block themselves from creating that kind of connection. Think about how most conversations begin. Something polite, something safe, something flat. Hey, how are you? How was your day? Hope you're doing well. These lines aren't bad. They're just invisible. They don't spark emotion. They don't create an image. They don't cut through the noise of her day. And if nothing you say stirs her emotionally, there's nothing for her mind to hold on to later. No hook, no replay. Here's something important to understand. The mind doesn't store words, it stores feelings. You might not remember the exact sentence someone said years ago, but you remember how they made you feel in that moment. That's emotional anchoring. Without it, even a pleasant conversation fades into the same dull blur as everything else. The unconscious mind doesn't respond to perfect grammar, flawless logic, or safe topics. It responds to symbols, images, and suggestion. That's why a single line with the right energy can be more powerful than dozens of long messages. Jung understood that what moves us most is often invisible to the rational mind. When your words carry subtle emotion, they slip past her mental guard. She's no longer replying just to be polite. She's replying because something in what you said touched an emotional thread she didn't even realize existed. And once that happens, you've already stood out. So, if your goal is to leave an impression that lasts, you have to stop leading with empty, emotionless lines. The next time you talk to a woman you like, ask yourself a simple question. Does this create an image? Does it spark curiosity? Does it move an emotion, or is it just filler? Because filler disappears, emotion stays. The moment you understand that attraction is built in the unconscious, not in polite exchanges, everything changes. You stop trying to impress with perfection. You start aiming for emotional resonance. That's when you move from being just another conversation to being the memory she keeps returning to. Let's be honest. Most conversations sound the same. Hey, how are you? How was your day? Hope everything's good. It's kind, it's safe, and it's completely forgettable. Kindness matters? Yes. But when it comes to attraction, safe is often the fastest way to fade into the background. Polite, neutral greetings don't activate the emotional part of the brain. They're placeholders. They don't create a picture. They don't spark feeling. And if you don't give the brain something emotional to hold on to, there's nothing to anchor the memory. Most people don't realize this, but the mind isn't like a recorder saving every word. It's more like an artist. It sketches moments that feel meaningful and blurs everything else into the background. You forget exact words, but you remember the feeling, the laugh, the curiosity, and the warmth. That's how emotional anchoring works. When you open with, "Hey, how are you?" her mind files it next to hundreds of similar messages she's already seen. It doesn't stand out, so it doesn't get replayed. And if you don't stand out early, you're already forgettable. Think about scent for a moment. Have you ever smelled a perfume or cologne and suddenly remembered someone from years ago? That's because scent is directly connected to memory and emotion in the brain. Words work the same way. When they carry feeling, they connect to emotion, and emotion is what gets stored. So the issue isn't that you reached out, it's how you did it. You spoke without meaning, without image, and without emotional weight. You didn't light up the emotional wiring. You didn't create a moment she could feel. And without that, there's nothing for her mind to return to later. And this is where everything starts to shift. Because once you understand this, you realize attraction isn't about chasing attention. It's about creating moments that quietly stay. Moments that feel small on the surface, but deep underneath. Moments that her unconscious keeps revisiting without her even trying to. We are wired to notice change. Anything that breaks a normal pattern, anything that interrupts the automatic rhythm of daily life gets marked by the brain as important. This wiring comes from survival. Thousands of years ago, noticing something different could mean the difference between finding food or becoming food. The brain learned very early that difference equals attention. Today, that same wiring still exists, just applied in a new way. Instead of predators or shelter, it notices people, it notices energy, and it notices presence. So when you open with something that makes her pause, something that pulls her out of her routine scrolling or distracted state, you are activating that novelty switch. You are waking up a part of her mind that most interactions never touch. And if what you say doesn't just break her pattern, but also stirs curiosity or emotion, now you've created something stronger. You've created a double anchor. She's not just noticing you in that moment. Her brain is also tagging you as someone worth thinking about again later. That's where attraction quietly begins to grow. But here's the warning most men miss. Novelty without emotion doesn't last. It's just a clever or funny line. It might get a smile, maybe even a quick laugh, but then it fades. It disappears the same way hundreds of other messages disappear. You need both. You need something unexpected and something that makes her feel something even lightly, because emotion is the glue that makes novelty stick. That's why there is such a big difference between saying something generic like, "How are you?" and saying something playful, charged, or slightly mysterious. One blends into the noise, the other slips past her guard and settles into her memory. And in attraction, the moment you take up emotional space in someone's mind, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer just another name on a screen, you become a presence. Here's the trap that most men don't even realize they are stepping into. You start sounding like everyone else. Same greetings, same safe questions, same predictable rhythm, and when you blend in like that, you vanish. It's not that she dislikes you. It's not that you did something wrong. It's simply that nothing in your words created a moment worth holding on to. You become part of the background noise of her day. Not the song she hums later, not the line she remembers, just noise. And because on some level you feel that you're not standing out, you try harder. You send longer messages. You add more emojis. You give bigger compliments. You ask question after question just to keep the conversation alive. You try to show effort. You try to show interest. But here's the hard truth. That behavior doesn't pull her closer. It often does the opposite. It pushes her away. The unconscious mind doesn't respond well to pressure, even when that pressure is polite and friendly. Attraction needs space to breathe. It grows in that quiet tension between wanting more and not having everything yet. When you flood her with attention, you remove that tension. Instead of feeling curious, she starts to feel weighed down. What once felt light and easy now feels like something she has to manage. Excessive effort also changes the emotional balance. Instead of her wondering if she can win you over, she starts to feel like the prize has already been handed to her. And human psychology places higher value on what feels earned. When something feels too available, the mind quietly assumes it has less worth. This isn't logical, it's instinctive. Constant questioning is one of the fastest ways to drain intrigue. It turns the interaction into an interview. It feels like work, not play. Now, asking questions isn't wrong. The right question asked at the right moment can create deep connection. But when questions are fired rapidly just to avoid silence, they send a message you don't intend. They say you're uncomfortable with space. They say you're more focused on filling gaps than creating moments. An attraction is not built on filling space, it's built on impact. It's not about how much you say, it's about what you leave behind after you've spoken. Your real goal is not to cover every pause or prove how interested you are. Your goal is to create sparks, small flashes of novelty, curiosity, and emotion that stand out against the dull background of everyday conversations. Think of it this way. If every other man is handing her a bucket of water, you want to be the one holding a match. Water is safe, water is common. A match changes the atmosphere instantly. A match has heat, a match has danger, a match makes someone stop and look, it creates a moment. That's the difference between being background noise and being music. Carl Jung often spoke about the power of symbols and emotional resonance. When you speak in a way that hints at possibility, when you paint even a small picture in her mind, you are not just making conversation, you are engaging her unconscious. And that's where real attraction lives. That's why instead of chasing her attention with more words, more flattery, and more effort, the strongest move is often to step back. Create space. Let your presence and your choice of words do the work. Give her room to feel you, not just read you. When you stop trying to outtalk every other man in her inbox and start focusing on impact, you move from being background static to being the signal she tunes into without knowing exactly why. And this is where it all begins. The shift becomes permanent. You aren't just a person she's talking to, You are a person she's experiencing. This leads us to the 3 words that change everything, but they only work because of the groundwork we've just discussed. They work because they bypass the analytical, logical brain and speak directly to the emotional core. These words are, I notice something. On the surface, they seem basic, but their psychological weight is immense. When you say, I notice something, you are instantly pulling her out of the mundane and into a focused, personal moment. You aren't asking her for something. You are offering an observation that belongs only to the 2 of you. It creates immediate curiosity, the most powerful engine of human thought. Her mind immediately begins to race. What did he notice? How does he see me? It forces her to view herself through your eyes, which is the very definition of becoming the center of her thoughts. This phrase acts as a bridge to the unconscious because it implies depth and attention. It suggests that while everyone else is looking at the surface, you are seeing the layers beneath. You can follow it with something small and specific, a shift in her energy, a way she expresses herself, or a nuance in her personality that others overlook. It's not about a grand compliment, it's about the intimacy of being truly seen. This is how you stop being a background character and become the protagonist in her mental narrative. By using these 3 words, you stop chasing her focus and instead invite her to explore the curiosity you've planted. The tension stays high, the impact remains deep, and the memory lingers because you've engaged her imagination. You've moved from making noise to creating a signal that her mind cannot help but follow. This is the art of resonance over effort, and it's the key to staying on her mind long after the conversation has ended. The transformation is finalized. When you utilize those words, you aren't just making a statement, you are opening a door. This leads us to the moment where the dynamic truly flips. Suddenly, the energy of the interaction is no longer about you trying to prove your worth, but about her wondering what it is you've discovered. It creates a vacuum that her mind instinctively wants to fill. This is the power of the open loop in psychology. By saying those words and then pausing or following them with a genuine, subtle observation, you create a story that hasn't finished yet. Her unconscious mind hates an unfinished story. It will keep returning to that moment, replay your tone, and wonder about your perspective until the loop is closed. This is exactly how you stay on someone's mind without sending a single follow-up text. You've moved from being a seeker of attention to a provider of meaning. Most men are terrified of the silence that follows a meaningful moment, so they rush to fill it with more talk, more jokes, or more questions. But the man who understands the unconscious knows that the silence is where the feeling actually sinks in. It's in those quiet gaps that she begins to associate you with a sense of depth and mystery. You become the person who doesn't just talk, but who actually perceives. And in a world full of people shouting for attention, the one who quietly observes is the one who truly stands out. This is the ultimate shift in power. You are no longer competing with the hundreds of other distractions in her life because you have moved into a category of your own. You have become a source of emotional resonance. This isn't just about dating, it's about the fundamental way humans connect. We are drawn to those who see us, who challenge our perception of ourselves, and who leave us feeling more curious about the world and our place in it. By mastering this simple shift, you stop being an option and start being a priority. You realize that the most valuable thing you can offer isn't your effort, but your presence and your unique way of seeing the person in front of you. That is the real secret. That is how you become truly unforgettable. The cycle of attraction completes itself. You must realize that the final stage of this process isn't about the words themselves, but about the permission you give her to feel. When you use those 3 words to bridge the gap between her surface level and her inner self, you are creating a sanctuary of understanding. Most interactions she has are transactional. They are about getting a response, getting a like, or getting a date. But when you lead with impact and observation, you are offering a rare emotional experience. This is where the concept of the shadow comes into play, another vital part of the psychology we've been discussing. We all have parts of ourselves we think no one sees. When you indicate that you've noticed something real, something subtle, you are speaking to that hidden side of her. You are telling her that you are paying attention in a way that others aren't. This creates a bond of trust that logic can never replicate. Now, here is the most critical part of the entire strategy. You must have the courage to let the moment breathe. Once the seed is planted and the curiosity is piqued, do not over-explain. Do not backtrack or apologize for the depth of the conversation. Let the impact of your presence settle. The reason most men fail at the very end is that they get nervous. They see that they've made a real connection and they panic, trying to bring the conversation back to something safe or normal. They kill the spark because they are afraid of the heat, but you must remain steady. If you can sit in the tension of a powerful moment without needing to break it, you demonstrate a level of emotional maturity and confidence that is incredibly rare. She will feel that stability. She will sense that you are a man who is comfortable with deep emotions and complex thoughts. That feeling of safety and intrigue is what she will carry with her long after you have walked away. You are no longer just a memory of a conversation. You are a memory of a feeling, and feelings are the only things the heart truly keeps. You have effectively moved from her inbox to her unconscious, and once you are there, the connection grows on its own. You don't have to do more because you have already done enough. You have been the match in a world full of water. You have been the signal in a world full of noise. The process reaches its peak when you realize that the ultimate goal is not just to capture her mind, but to remain there with authenticity. This final layer is about consistency and the energy you project after the initial impact has been made. Once you have used those 3 words to establish a connection, your subsequent actions must reflect that same level of depth. You cannot revert to the safe, boring patterns of the average man because that would break the spell you've just cast. You have set a new standard for how the two of you communicate, and you must maintain that standard by continuing to lead with curiosity and observation. It is about becoming a man who is consistently observant, someone who values the nuance of human interaction over the volume of it. This doesn't mean every sentence has to be a profound psychological revelation, but it does mean that your presence should always carry a sense of weight and intention. When you show up this way, you reinforce the image she has formed of you in her unconscious mind. You prove that the initial spark wasn't a fluke or a performance, but a genuine reflection of who you are. This creates a feedback loop of attraction where her interest grows deeper every time you interact, because each moment adds another layer to the story she is telling herself about you. You are building a mental landscape where you are the most vivid and interesting figure. The beauty of this approach is that it requires less work over time, not more, because you are working with the grain of human psychology rather than against it. The attraction becomes self-sustaining. She will start to look for the things you notice. She will begin to value your perspective above others because she knows it comes from a place of true perception. This is how a simple conversation evolves into a lasting bond. You have moved past the games and the tactics and entered the realm of real human resonance. You have mastered the ability to speak to the part of her that most people never reach, and in doing so, you have made yourself a permanent fixture in her thoughts. You are no longer chasing the light, you have become the source of it. The realization